Hello and welcome to This Week Back in the Day. And on this episode, we're talking about when Liam Tuohy walked out on Jack Charlton on the 26th of February, 1986. I'm David, your host, and joined as always by Martin. Martin, how you doing?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Dave. Looking forward to covering this one.
It's one of those niche ones, isn't it? It's one that not many people realize. I mean, some people will remember the background or the walkout, I should say, but they won't understand the implications that it had at the time for a certain Mr. Jack Charlton. So I find this one fascinating. And it just seems to be a recurring theme in Irish football, Martin, doesn't it? Just people just can't get along.
No, it's a shame to see actually with this one because Liam Tuohy is may not be familiar with many of our listeners, to be honest, because he was from that certain generation and quite a while back now when Jack was first appointed. But he did have a great history with the association before that. Real FAI man,
Yeah,
really good record bringing through young players. Actually developed a lot of our players and had some great success at youth level. And sadly, he has gone to the great football pitch up in heaven. But he's left a fantastic legacy behind him, and sadly, when he did pass away, the brilliant kind of respectful kind of condolences that were offered to his families and the reminiscences about it. What a great man he was, what a great football man.
yeah, he's sort of like an older version of Brian Kerr, actually, who will also feature in this particular episode. No, Liam Tuohy, like he really is an Irish, a real footballing man. Actually, just to go into his background, Liam was born in East Wall in Dublin in 1933. He did play as an outside left, which I believe is a winger, Martin, isn't it?
That is right. Yep.
There you go. Learn something new
I'm
every.
trying to say something about my age that I know that. Thanks, Dave.
No, no. To be fair, I mean, my granddad, when he'd be telling me stories about Irish football or just football in general, and he'd be like, outside right, corner forward, and fucking all that. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Sweeper. I think the sweeper was still around at that stage. And no, he's not a guy with a brush for you kids listening. But anyway, he played as an outside left or a winger, as you might know him as. Even a winger now. You have wing backs these days. For Shamrock Rovers. He also played for Newcastle United, amongst other clubs. For Ireland, he had 8 caps, 4 goals for the senior team. And he would get into management. He would actually manage Shamrock Rovers, Shelburne, amongst others, and would eventually manage the Republic of Ireland from 1971 to 1973. Yeah, he dipped in and out of some other coaching roles in Ireland. But in 1981, he would take up a coaching role with the FAI as a youth manager, where he actually did quite well. We'll talk about that a bit more. So let's fast forward to the 7th of February, 1986. Jack Charlton is announced as Ireland manager in what can only be described as a farcical process, which Liam Tuohy was involved in. He was one of the runners, I suppose, but he was never really seriously considered for the role. But he was just there in case the FAI needed somebody as a backup plan. So, with Jack as new Ireland boss, they both meet what's believed to be the 12th of February in Jack's hotel room to discuss a possible working agreement. Jack hadn't actually asked to see Liam, but the FAI insisted because, well, they thought that Liam would be a perfect foil for Jack because Jack didn't know Ireland. Liam did. He was currently the youth manager, a non-paying role, by the way, a voluntary role. But they thought that would be perfect for Jack to ease him into the Ireland job. When they both met, Tuohy apparently had filled Jack in about his record and the fact that they were in the middle of qualifying or attempting to qualify for the 4th European Championship on the trot. Jack sort of left the meeting saying, look, didn't want to meet you, but we might be able to work something out here, but I'm undecided, but we'll just keep things as they are. And that kind of seemed to suit both parties.
I think this is kind of an indication of how the FAI was still operating back then. We had the farcical appointment kind of process anyway, and yet they got their man in the end, Jack Charlton, because of very narrow votes, as we covered in the previous episode.
Yes.
Of back in the day. And you were still left with the FAI kind of a bit worried about the control that they'd actually relinquished to Jack Charlton. And so what they want to do in the background is keep their inside man involved in the whole organisation. And that man was Liam Tuohy, very company man, as we've said, fantastic record. He'd led the team in the past, even on that infamous trip to Brazil that time, where an Ireland team had represented in some tournament, wasn't it, where they were brought over,
Yep.
and
That's
they
also available in the archives, by the way, and the
it
tournament
is, yeah,
materials. Just putting it out there.
yep, worth a listen completely. And even looking back to Liam Tuohy's kind of tenure as a manager previously, he had a very good knowledge of Irish football, the players coming through. He was probably more informed about them than Jack was. He was actually better positioned to knowing Irish players and who was eligible than Big Jack, because Jack said that himself. I don't even know where half the players are. We know infamously he didn't even pick the first team when he was appointed as manager, which I'm sure we'll come on to cover in a future episode. But we Liam Tuohy was making himself available for the FAI and for the good of the game, and had a fantastic reputation. And even on that tour in Brazil, all the players speak glowingly of him, of what how he was very clearly the boss, but he respected them, and he did allow them to play, and he respected their opinions and stuff. And I think that's where probably the clash was going to come with Jack, because Jack was coming in to an organization and to manage a team where it was going to be Jack's way, basically.
Yep.
And that was going to clash completely with the mindset of management that Liam Tuohy had.
Oh, 100%. We're going to get to that right now. So the incident, well, we're going to talk about the build up to the incident. So let's fast forward again to the 25th of February, 1986, 3 weeks after Liam and Jack had sat down and agreed to continue as they were and see how they get on. Liam would take charge of the Ireland youths against England, who, Ireland, as I said, were trying to qualify with a fourth consecutive European Championship. It was due to be played in Sheffield. I'm not sure if that was Bramall Lane or Hillsborough. I am getting these notes, by the way, from the brilliant Team That Jack Built book by Paul Rowan. Paul Rowan of Champagne football fame of Mark Ty. I recommend you go out on the eBay and get this book. It caused murder. This book did, because Jack maybe didn't expect half of these comments to be published, and you'll understand why. Especially, this is one of the subjects, Martin, isn't it? This is one of the touchy subjects that Jack didn't want published, and there's other stuff with Liam and Frank and all of that. But anyway, this is like Jack unfiltered. So anyway, Jack decides to show up at the game unannounced, because the game he was supposed to watch was actually abandoned due to bad weather. Jack would have lunch with the team, and just appeared, according to Liam, to be itching for a row. He just seemed to be taking issue with everything. He was moaning about the menu. He didn't like how the lads were eating steak. Jack wanted him to eat pasta, the superfood of football at the time, I suppose, according to Jack. Liam had actually counter-argued that with Jack, saying, well, at the end of the day, steak can't be that bad. We qualified for the last €3. I'm sure that went up Jack's arse sideways. The game is called off at the last minute, and it's moved to Ellen Road in Leeds. So the team get on the bus. Jack gets in his car and he head up to Ellen Road, a stadium, as we all know, Jack knows very, very well. So before the game, Tuohy says to Jack, why don't you come back during the break if you got any observations to make? And, because you're the senior manager, I'm your coach, so by all means. Jack said, yeah, might do that. During that game, Ireland found themselves 2-0 down at half time. This, Martin, is where it basically hits the fan here. So according to Liam, we're going to try and give both sides to this. So according to Liam, Jack just came bursting into the dressing room at halftime, stands directly in front of Liam, just ignored Liam Tuohy completely, and made very negative comments about the style that they're playing, and demanded the long ball. So if we're going to play this style of football, you've got to play this long ball. Liam Tuohy obviously wasn't very happy about it, because, they played a good passing game, and he just felt disrespected by the whole thing. Now, the game was finished 2-0. Jack would reappear after the match and give a talk about his philosophy of POMO. Do you know what POMO stands for?
Yep, I do. Was it position of maximum opportunity?
That's the one.
Yeah.
That's basically your Graham Taylors, your Jack Charltons, all your Liddy Shaw Academy coaches. Liddy Shaw was the old coach in England. Basically, you had to go through Liddy Shaw to get your badges. And that's what they were basically teaching the coaches positions of maximum opportunity. Put them under pressure, basically.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. And I'll be honest with you, I did my coaching badge first time in 1998, and the book we were using was still the book written by Charles Hughes, and that's all they talked about in the book. And the photos in the book, that was our study guide basically, in 1998 were from the England team's preparation and training in 1970 for the World Cup. That will show you where English football was in 1998. They were still talking about that then. So I'm glad to say, as with the FAI and the FA models now of coaching development, we have moved on from that. But you will still have some coaches like Sam Allardyce still will talk about position of maximum opportunity in his coaching philosophy and very stat-based coaching approach. Just a side note on that there, the Pete Dave.
No, love it. That's what, I didn't know that actually, but yeah, it doesn't surprise me. Doesn't surprise me at all. No wonder English international football was in the shit in the 90s. So after the incident, as we said, Liam felt that he had no choice but to quit. He respected Jack's opinions, but there's a way of doing it. If he wanted to, he felt if you want to change the style, that's fine because you're the senior manager, but don't just disrespect me in front of my players. When he got back to Dublin the next day on the 26th, he actually just handed his resignation into Marion Square. Went, "Now I've had enough of this." And his assistant manager, you might know these two lads, Martin, Noel O'Reilly and Brian Kerr, followed. And Tui said of this, he says, "I was in a position that I take the shit he was giving me and stay on. I was doing the job for nothing. I didn't need that. I mean, I've been a manager of the senior team. It's not like I was some rookie coming in." So, do you think Liam, he felt disrespected, obviously, and Jack, well, I was going to say, actually, Martin, that Jack probably wouldn't know who Liam Tuohy was. Now, we'll get to Jack's side of it in a second, but you shared something very interesting with me, that they had a little bit of a nibble, didn't they, back in 1965 in an all-league game, a League of Ireland versus English Football League game in Hull.
Yeah, I think this is like a bit of a clash of personalities here, and I think also it's very, very, very clear that Jack perhaps holds grudges. I did a little bit of research on this, as you know, and they both played against each other in a football league. That would be the English Football League representative side against the Football League of Ireland at Boothbury Park in Hull in 27th October 1965. Now, Jack had made his debut for England quite late in his career. Where Sir Alf Ramsey brought him in very, very late. And again, it's worth noting that Jack was a no-nonsense centre-half. Why Sir Alf Ramsey loved him was because he knew that when Bobby Moore went wandering, Jack Charlton wouldn't, and he would stay because it was Jack's philosophy and view that we defend first, and that's what we do. And that's why Alf Ramsey loved him. But yeah, Jack had made his debut only in the April of that same year, 1965. Obviously, this is a year before England became world champions, where Jack obviously wins it alongside his brother Bobby. Mm-hmm. But they played in this game against each other, Liam Tuohy against Jack Charlton. And they were actually both captains on that evening. So I have seen a little bit of a video clip of it, actually. I forget who is the person talking about it, but he says that during the game, Liam Tuohy nutmegs Jack Charlton.
Yeah.
And Jack Charlton kind of says to him, "Don't be doing that again." And he says, "Or I'll do you." And Liam Tuohy says, "You're not fast enough to catch me." So you would hope that's a bit kind of, light-hearted kind of banter on the pitch, and that nothing would obviously carry on, almost 20 years onwards. Is there still a grudge there? But I thought it was an interesting kind of side note of their kind of relationship, and shows that they did know each other.
Yeah.
He probably would have known him because he was in Newcastle, and that's very close to where Jack was obviously brought up.
Right, so let's have a listen to what Jack said about the situation. This is all from Paul Rowan's book, The Team that Jack Built. I can't help but hear this in Jack's voice. Liam Tuohy caused me more aggravation when I took the job on over here than anyone else. I went over to Sheffield because I had just been appointed to the job, and obviously I'm now manager of the FAI. My responsibility is to every team that represents the FAI anywhere. I went into the dressing room before the game. Liam said, "Do you want to say anything to them?" I said that I'll have a look at them in the first half, and if I see anything that has a bearing on the game, I'll say at half time. So I came in and Liam was doing his talk. And Liam said, do you want to say anything to them? And I said, yeah, a couple of things. Just a few technical things in football. Yeah, hit it in the corner. Then he went out and played the second half. They were getting beat 2-0 at half time and he got beat 2-0. But they were tighter, they were better. They had closed things down. After the game, I said, I enjoyed the game. Sorry you lost. These things happen. But when you improve, you'll get better. Then I left and everything was fine. All of a sudden, I thought Liam was going to work and keep an eye on things for me in Ireland. Instead, he just resigned. Jack then continues after the resignation. This is where it gets really interesting. Jack on Liam Tuohy. Liam left me with international sides all over the place. Matches coming up. I didn't know anyone in Ireland. I left with a whole bloody thing, and Liam Tuohy just dropped me on my head. And then afterwards, Jack does try to talk Noel and Brian Keir around. And he said to them, the least you could do is see if you like me, stay with me for a few months, and just see. Things might get great here, and you'll regret it. Then Jack receives a phone call, and they say, no, sorry, Jack, we're going with Liam. And then Jack says about Liam Tuohy's decision, Liam made a bloody big mistake. He could have been on the inside. Now with everything I've achieved, the one thing that gives me great pleasure is that I stuffed it up his arse. That gives me great pleasure. Whatever I achieved is with no help from him. And I want people in this country to understand that. Now, that's one of the comments that Jack wasn't very pleased that made print when he was obviously talking to Paul Rowan. So, I mean, you're saying that he holds grudges. Now, Jack has always said, hasn't he, that he's never held grudges against players. You know, David O'Leary. Yeah, I mean,
it's a hard one, isn't it? I think Jack, as a manager, I think he was just so fixed in his way of doing things and brought amazing success doing so. But he didn't care about upsetting people. We've seen that with the recent Liam Brady documentary, where I think afterwards, Jack is actually a lovely, sensitive soul that when he did reflect in a bit of downtime and probably analysed everything he had achieved, he took the opportunity to kind of, I thought it was very heart-rendering when he actually writes to Liam Brady saying, I never meant to hurt you, how it ended with him.
Yeah.
I think the Liam Tuohy thing, you know, although he's madly respected in Irish football by a certain kind of area, basically, as a proud dub and stuff, he's, you know, Brian Kerr and Noel O'Reilly would have spoken very highly of him. And a lot of people who were, you know, coming through at the various clubs around Dublin where he was an integral part of their football development, basically. They will speak very, very highly of him and what he achieved, because he did hold together Irish football, basically. And even previous managers like Owen Hand, you know, they did a lot of great work for Ireland in the background against the kind of shit show that was the FAI. So don't be surprised, listeners, that the FAI was a shit show. Sometimes people think it is now. It's always kind of been that way. Jack was an incredibly lucky manager in many ways, that he brought on, he inherited a fantastically talented group of players. He molded them into the way he wanted to play, which wasn't very popular with everybody else. And actually, it's worth bringing up another point on this is, I think why Jack feels a bit embittered towards Liam Tuohy is we got very lucky qualifying for Euro 88 on the back of Gary Mackay's goal, obviously, against Bulgaria. And our last qualifying game against that was a win over Bulgaria, where only 26,000 were at Lansdowne Road for the team's final qualifier. And a lot of people who wanted Ireland to play very good football, they weren't very enamoured with what Jack was doing. You know, didn't think we were going to qualify at that time, and obviously we went on and did so. But Liam Tuohy had a column in the Evening Herald, and it appeared with the headline Charlton's tactics flop. And he was very, very critical of Jack Charlton and the football.
He was also on the panel as well.
He was, 80s. He was a pundit, yeah. He said the Gary Owen tactics of the Irish football team under Jack Charlton are totally unsuited to demands of international football, particularly at home. So I think it showed that, in a way, Tuohy kind of held a grudge as well. They weren't very close pals. They weren't happy with how it all ended for each other. But Jack went on and had the unbelievable success with Ireland based on, let's be very fair on it, Liam Tuohy's fantastic development of some of our youth players, especially, and also inspired, you know, future managers like Noel O'Reilly and Brian Kerr, who had fantastic success at youth level. We were very, very successful. So, I think he does have a very important part to play in Irish football history.
Yeah, he does. And, what people probably don't realize is that he was supposed to be Jack's right-hand man. He was supposed to be assistant manager. And Maurice Setters was a very late appointment. Jack was ruthless, which, by the way, I respect as a manager. He should be ruthless. There's no loyalty. There's no loyalty. And if David O'Leary, for example, we talk about him, 86. Jack's first game, Jack didn't fancy him. Didn't play again until Seville 1988. And it was only because Ireland were severely depleted and lost 2-0, their second World Cup qualifier. Jack, if it wasn't for the fact that Ireland were depleted, David O'Leary wouldn't have come back.
Yeah, exactly. That's the luck of it. And
Mick had serious back injuries as well. He wouldn't have, if it wasn't for that, David O'Leary wouldn't have featured in the Euro 91 qualifiers. Sorry, the Euro 92 qualifiers. He wouldn't have. So I think what Jack he's like, yeah, if you're of use to me, I'll do what I can to fit you in the team, like you did with Liam Brady. But once you're too old or once you're of no use to me, then I'm not interested in that. And I think that's kind of what happened with Liam Tuohy there. I don't know if he held a grudge over that league game or anything like that, but I do think it was a massive clash of philosophies. Liam Tuohy obviously was probably had a bit, who's this guy coming over here? Like, this is, we helped build this game here, which they did, to be fair. I doubt they ever saw right. I don't think they ever made up, did they?
No, I'm not aware of it. No, but very highly respected Liam Tuohy towards the end. In Irish football circles, honoured, great tributes, as I said, with when he passed away, and one of those honoured with a kind of little booth, basically showing some memorabilia and stuff in Abbottstown, which should be in a football museum, basically.
Yes, it should. Well, that's all we have time for tonight. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts, and to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, which is all in our bio. Thank you so much for supporting the podcast, and we will see you next week for This Week Back in the Day. All the best.